Okay, I will once in a while be turning my back to show you the presentation. First of all, how many people here have never seen Battleship Potemkin? Oh, are you in for a treat? Now, there are some gory scenes, so as they say on TV, viewer discretion prescribe, cover your eyes, because this was realistic. Filmed in 1925 as a Soviet propaganda film. Now, what you saw earlier was a little film clip that showed the actual Battleship Potemkin. The ship, which I'll show in more detail, only had 2 guns on a single turret. As an example, 40 years later, the American battleships in World War II, particularly the Missouri and the Iowa, had 9 guns, 16-inch shells. Now for me, I used to work at Westinghouse Marine Division down in Sunnyvale. During World War II, they made 16-inch shells. They worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The wives would bring in meals for their husband so they didn't have to leave the factory. So the guns on the Potemkin were only 12-inch with a range of about 10 miles. The Missouri's guns had a range of 26 miles. So you can see the technology changed in basically a short time period. Now the Potemkin, which I'll show in the films here, was launched in 1900 and was already obsolete. The Russians were already building bigger ships with bigger guns. The other thing is those guns on the Potemkin took 4 minutes to reload. The guns on the Missouri took 1 minute. Okay, so the presentation, the Battleship Potemkin was directed by Sergei Eisenstein, and I'll probably screw up Russian, sorry, Eisenstein, and so I'm giving you the preview tonight. Okay, now, the story takes place in Odessa. It's been in the news today because of the war, but you can see where Odessa is. Let me get my light here. Right here. It's on the Black Sea. Yalta is down in here, in Kiev, and you can see how much bigger Ukraine is compared to the little area over here that the Russians have taken in the current war. Now, the gentleman that's mainly involved in this is Field Marshal Prince Grigory Alexandrovich Potemkin Tershninsky. He was born in 1739. He died in 1891. Now, he started out as a low-level officer, but he became a favored lover of the Empress Catherine the Great. She had a whole bunch of lovers. Okay? Now, we believe that they got married, but the dates are uncertain. Did they get married actually? Did they get divorced? We don't know. But towards the end here, they had a war against the Turks, Ottomans, in which the Russians captured Ukraine, captured Crimea and such, and Odessa. Now, although the actual takeover of Odessa didn't occur until 1894, Potemkin was planning the redesign of the city shortly before his death. And so, one of the other jobs that he had with Catherine was to check out her potential lovers. The only way I can say it is to check out their equipment and make sure that they would satisfy her. She was what we would call today a nymph. Okay, very, very active sexually. So there's a whole list of lovers that she had, but he was her favorite. She didn't marry the other guy, she married him. So, this is another picture of the Potemkin, and you see here the 2 guns. It only had a single turret. The fleet was for part of the Russians' Black Sea Fleet. The original name is Akaza Potemkin Tarashkeva, or Prince Potemkin of Taurida. The ship was 378 feet. The Missouri is almost over 900 feet. And it had just a 12-inch gun that took 4 minutes to reload. In 1919, during the Russian Revolution that was going on in the rest of the country, the Allies captured the ship, and to keep it from being captured by the Bolsheviks, they handed it to the British, who destroyed the steam engine. It had piston engines, only had top speed of about 10 knots. Our modern aircraft carriers with the U.S. Navy can travel at 35 knots, and they are huge ships compared to the Potemkin. Now, in the movie, you'll see a ship that has 3 guns on the turret because they couldn't use the Potemkin. It was already scrapped. In fact, when the ship was launched, it was already obsolete. They were building a bigger ship already, but they said, hey, we got this ship, let's use it. So, in a brief history, Odessa was founded by the Tartars in 1240. Odessa was founded by a decree of Catherine the Great, Catherine II of Russia in 1794. That's when they captured it. The Russians captured the city. Now, what started this off, basically, was when the ship was off the Ukrainian coast, and many enlisted men refused to eat the borscht made from rotten meat infested with maggots. Now, you saw in that other clip, the guys were holding out their food to the guy. That was the problem. Now, as Rhonda mentioned earlier, there are things in a 1925 movie that wouldn't fly today. How many of you seen the Shawshank Redemption? Should be almost every hand. Okay, you'll notice there's a scene in which Andy Dufresne, Tim Robbins, is getting his dinner. And he looks down and there's maggots in it. And James Whitmore, Brooks, asks him for a maggot. And Andy's like, what the, the look on his face. Well, he wants to feed it to the bird. Well, the animal rights people said that's cruel on the maggot. They had to go find a dead maggot for the scene. They obviously didn't worry about that in 1925. Okay. So, on the ship, one of the sailors was killed, and they killed the ship's captain, and then they sailed the ship to Odessa. Now, they arrived on June 30th, 1905. The mutineers were already planning on joining the civilian revolution in August, but they had to speed it up because of the mutiny. Now, when the mutiny was over, and that's not part of the movie, a bunch of the mutineers were captured. They wanted to stay in Odessa and were executed. Others basically disappeared. They scattered throughout Europe, and their whereabouts was unknown. Now, today we have much better technology finding people, but they got away with it. Okay, so now, when the ship arrived, remember they showed the one sailor being killed right away in that short little movie. Well, he's killed in the battleship too. And this was his name, and they took him ashore. Now in the movie they had that little film clip, they had him on the deck there, on the pier, with all of the people, the ladies in their native costume. Well, they took his body in real life and put him at the foot of the Richelieu steps, which play a prominent role in this movie. They're now known as the Potemkin steps, but back then they were the Richelieu steps. The Duke of Richelieu, who was important in the city of Odessa, was related to the Cardinal Richelieu in France under the Sun King, Louis XIV. And so there is that relationship in Europe, but it's not the same guy. Okay? And then they joined the revolution. And this is a poster for the original movie. I'm sure a few of you can read it who can know Russian. Very easy to see that it's Potemkin down here. Even I can figure that, and I don't know Cyrillic. Okay, the director, Sergei Mikhailovich Eisenstein, was born January 22nd, 1898 in Riga, Latvia. At that time, it was part of the Russian Empire. Okay, and he died in Moscow shortly after World War II. Now, he was a Russian film director, and through his works include three films, classic, Battleship Potemkin, Alexander Nevsky, 1938, and Ivan the Terrible, released in two parts in 1944, and the second part about 10 years after he died. Okay, now he was an assistant director at the Poletkulet Theater. Again, sorry if I mispronounced the Russian theater of the people in Moscow, and later became more involved in play development. He developed a strong interest in kabuki theater in Japan, which was to influence his ideas in his film. Now, he was hired by the Russian Soviet government to make a propaganda film. Now, being that it was a propaganda film, when it was released in the West, the movie was banned in the UK and in France until after the death of Stalin in 1953. When he passed away, the British kept it banned until 1954. Okay. There are several versions of the movie. One was an American film. We're showing the original USSR film that we have in our vault. Now, I did want to mention that the previous film that we saw tonight was donated to us in a box of other films, and one of our board members is busy cataloging all the movies. We have other people cataloging the posters that we have, the film, the photographs, the books, everything. We're finally putting it on a program called Catalog It. And we're going to make that available to the general public so film historians and such researchers can see what we have and come and see stuff. But that was a film. We get a lot of people, well, here's a box of stuff Dad had. We don't know what the hell to do with it. And they give it to us. And one day, several years ago, David got a phone call. I think it was a person was in Indiana or Iowa, something. Hey, we just found an antique film projector with a film in the projector down in Dad's basement. It was a nitrate film that was protected because it was kept cold. And so that's how we acquired that film and the projector. They gave it to us. Okay, so the ship that you'll see in the movie is the Ganguts, Ganguts, that was built in 1914. And again, it has 3 guns in the turret instead of 2. Okay, so, and this film is one of the top-rated silent film era movies. There are a lot of top films, okay, but this is one of them. Okay, now this is my last slide. Now, the Potemkin stairs, and I mentioned Richelieu. There's his statue at the top of the stairs. Now, Odessa is built on a bluff, so this down here at the bottom is at the sea level of the Black Sea. It is the port. When my wife and I, Kathy here, when we went to the Black Sea to see a solar eclipse in 1999, our ship, which happened to be a former Russian Navy ship, troop ship, we had a front cabin, and when we pulled back the window screen, there was the steps right in front of us. I about died because I knew they were there. I first saw this movie 50 years ago when I was in college getting my history degree. And my professor was a filmmaker. He also made another film called The Frozen War, in which he got footage from the Library of Congress about the American efforts to help the white Russians in Archangel. And he interviewed, at that time they were still alive, veterans of World War I who had participated in that effort. Now, the stairs now known as the Potemkin stairs originally were the Richelieu steps. There were 200 steps that were made of sandstone, built in almost 200 years ago. And the stairs were wearing out. And so they were replaced with granite steps. And then these walkways, you can just see it right here, one of them, another one here, took out steps. And it's made with granite steps now. Now, in the film, there's something going on with the cable cars on the side. Here on the side, it's still there. There's a funicular cable system in which there are two cars. One goes up, one goes down. Okay. Sergei mounted a camera on that. And I don't want to give it away to those who haven't seen it. But it's one of the most historic scenes in the silent film era. And so you're going to see that tree. Again, the people are trying to go up the stairs. There are the Cossacks up above, and it does get rather gory. So be prepared. So they renamed the stairs in 1955, which would be the 50th anniversary of the revolution, which failed, obviously. But the people were successful 12 years later in 1917. So that's it. Enjoy the movie, and you're going to see it's a wonderful film called taking place in Odessa, Ukraine. Okay.